Kicked out my girlfriend after she terrorized my blind brother, insisting it made him more aware. Now she's bombarding me with messages. My girlfriend, 23F, and I, 24F, have been together for 2 years now. My family instantly adored her, and she even struck up a genuinely good relationship with my little brother, 16M. But last year everything turned upside down for us. My brother was diagnosed with a serious disease that almost claimed his life. He's always had a weak immune system, so when things got bad, they got really bad. Thankfully, my brother is now in a better place health-wise, though still recovering. Yet, the disease robbed him of his sight. Legally, he's now considered blind. Then, with social isolation beginning because of recent world events, I decided to talk to my parents. Both of them are essential workers, constantly exposed and busy with patients, which made it almost impossible for them to look after my brother, or help him adapt to life as a blind person. Given his immune system, having him stay with them wasn't safe for him. I work from home and have a lot of time on my hands, so it only made sense for him to live with me for now. My parents agreed readily. It was truly the best option for everyone. I also invited my girlfriend to move in with us. She already had a nice place of her own, but I figured, why not make the best of it and have everyone together? For a while, everything seemed perfect, but recently, I began to notice my brother wasn't himself, at least not when my girlfriend was around. Ever since he lost his sight, he'd been surprisingly cheerful, always looking for the silver lining. But now, whenever she was in the room, he became withdrawn and quiet, almost anxious. Yesterday, I caught a strange moment. I was reading in the living room while my brother got some water from the kitchen. My girlfriend had just woken up and wandered over to say good morning. My brother flinched. I shrugged it off as a fluke, maybe she startled him accidentally. But today made everything painfully clear. I was preparing lunch, music playing in the background, and my brother sat nearby chatting with me. My girlfriend entered quietly, almost tiptoeing, and when she got behind my brother she suddenly grabbed his shoulders and yelled, "Hello there. How you're doing?" My brother immediately got up and said he wanted to be alone, retreating to his room. Anger boiled in me. When I confronted her about what just happened, she told me she'd read on the internet, and heard from her own mother, that scaring blind people somehow makes them more aware of their surroundings. I started piecing things together and asked how long she'd been doing this. She casually admitted that for about 2 weeks, she'd been startling my brother up to 3 times a day if possible. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I told her in no uncertain terms she was to never do that again. But that afternoon, while I was outside watering the garden, I heard shouting from inside. I rushed in to find my brother yelling for her to leave him alone. That's when the real fight broke out between her and me. I tried to make her understand how wrong her actions were, and that this had to stop or she'd have to go back to her own place. Begrudgingly, she promised to stop. But she couldn't. That very night, while I was making dinner, she did it again. I snapped. Another argument erupted, and this time, I told her to pack up and go home. She argued that I was being unfair and insisted she was just trying to help. Still, I refused to let her stay. My brother's safety and comfort had to come first. Ever since, my phone hasn't stopped lighting up. She's bombarded me with messages, furious that I made her leave over something so trivial. I haven't replied. I just don't know what to say. I'm torn. Maybe I shouldn't have kicked her out so suddenly, but how could I let her stay knowing how distressed my brother is? He even told me he hadn't said anything sooner because he didn't want to cause problems as a guest. I know my girlfriend can be stubborn, but I never saw her cross a line like this before. I'm at a breaking point. Should I let her return and set strict boundaries? Should I keep her out until my brother can move back in with our parents? Besides this, she's always been loving and respectful toward me and my family. I genuinely don't know how to move forward from here. Update 1. I decided to reach out to my girlfriend and talk things through, but I made it clear she wouldn't be coming back into my home. I insisted we meet somewhere else. She suggested her place, so I headed over. The first thing I needed to know was where she got this ridiculous idea about scaring blind people being somehow beneficial. She hesitated, dodging the question, but I pressed her and eventually got the truth. There was no article, no study, no research. The advice she acted on came from a Facebook chat with a friend, and she just went along with it. She admitted she'd lied about her mother supporting it. Her mom is a social worker in our area, so she thought saying her mother agreed would make her friend's advice sound credible, especially since she couldn't find a single supporting article or study. When I asked how she could believe someone's random advice without anything to back it up, she just clammed up. I needed her to explain why she kept scaring my brother even after I repeatedly asked her to stop. She told me she didn't think I'd mind that much, and if I truly loved her, I'd just ignore it because she was trying to help. She accused me of not loving her, saying I was choosing my brother over her just because he's now a crippled, her actual word, and that all of this was something trivial he needed to grow up and deal with himself. As her girlfriend, she said, I should always be on her side. My anger boiled over at this point. She insisted I shouldn't have invited my brother to live with us at all, but since I had, he should just be quiet and obey because we're the adults and know better. Before going over to her house, I'd spent a lot of time thinking about our relationship. Looking back, so much of it was one-sided. Every step forward, dates, movie nights, romantic moments, I was always the one initiating. She never seemed to care about my boundaries, dismissing one after another. They were small things back then, and I convinced myself they didn't matter. Now I see I should have stood up for myself earlier because it grew into something painful, hurting my brother and filling me with guilt. I realized things had to change if there was any hope for us. I told her I didn't want to break up, but if we were to continue, she would no longer be allowed near my brother. She wouldn't be welcome in my home when he was there. She needed to sincerely apologize to him, promise to respect boundaries and, this time, keep that promise. Finally, I told her, we'd have to go to counseling together. These were my terms. She didn't take it well. Furious, she cursed at me, calling me an idiot for prioritizing my family, and said I was crazy to end a relationship over something so trivial. When I brought up those one-sided issues from before, she called me stupid, insisting this was what a good relationship looked like. The fight escalated again. She refused to compromise, and I saw she didn't really want to make this work, so I ended things. We broke up then and there. Leaving her house, I heard plenty of names hurled my way. I blocked her on my phone and social media, and now, my focus is entirely on my brother. It hurts. The person I recently called the love of my life turned out to be so cold. But deep down, I know it's for the best. My brother is already in therapy, which I'm grateful for, but I can't help feeling guilty for letting things get this far and allowing her boundary issues to impact him so badly. Now, at least, I'm determined to do right by him and myself, and move forward with a little more strength. Update 2. I thought things would settle after the breakup. They did not. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door while I was on the floor helping my brother label pantry shelves with those raised dots our therapist recommended. I looked through the peephole and saw my ex's mother. I almost didn't open it. I did, but kept the chain on. She didn't even say hello at first. She held up a small silver key between 2 fingers, like it was a bug. I found this in my daughter's bag, she said. She told me it was a spare for your place. I do not know if she copied it or stole it, but this is not going to be used. Something in my spine went cold. I hadn't given my ex a key since we moved, and the only spare I had was taped under the gas meter in the basement for emergencies, a stupid habit I copied from my parents. The woman saw my face change and her own softened. She apologized for everything, for her daughter putting her name in her mouth, for the lies. She explained she'd shown up because my ex had been talking about just going over and talking it out and she wanted to make sure I was safe. I took the key through the gap and thanked her. I didn't invite her in. She nodded, like she understood I had every right not to. Before she left she asked, very carefully, if she could apologize to my brother. I called his name and told him who was at the door. He came down the hall with his cane and stood next to me, shoulders squared. She spoke to him directly and said, I am so sorry for how my daughter treated you. It was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it. He tilted his face toward her voice and said, thank you for saying that, and I could tell he meant it. I changed the locks that afternoon. New deadbolt, no more basement key. I put a chain and a cheap camera above the door that pings my phone when someone comes close. I told my building's manager and the old lady on the second floor, who sees everything anyway. I thought that would be that. That night, around 11, the camera pinged. My brother and I were halfway through an audiobook and a bowl of popcorn. I glanced at my phone and recognized the posture immediately, even in grainy grayscale. She had her hood up and stood sideways, like she wanted to be near but not be seen. Then the handle turned. It clicked against the new lock. The next sound was the softest laugh. Not a happy one. I was shaking, but I spoke through the door. Go home, do not come here again. Her voice came sweet, then sour. I just want to talk. You've blown this out of proportion. Let me in. I know you changed the lock. That's controlling. My brother, who had been quiet, took one step forward with his cane and said, clear and steady, you can't scare me in my house anymore. There was a pause, the kind where time stretches and snaps. Then she hissed something I won't write out, and the footsteps faded. My brother and I stood there until we heard the lobby door thump shut. He exhaled a breath I didn't realize he'd been holding and said, my legs are shaking, and we sank to the floor together and let them shake. The next morning, I filed for a harassment order. I called my therapist first, just to hear a reasonable voice. She told me to write everything down while it was still fresh. I printed the messages, saved the camera clip, and sat in a bland office with a plexiglass window while a clerk slid forms under to me with a pen attached to a plastic flower. The judge granted a temporary order pending a hearing. The paper felt too thin for what it meant, but when I laid it on the kitchen table my brother ran his fingers along the edges like it was a map. Around the same time, I got a long message from the friend my ex had claimed was behind the advice. She said she didn't tell her to do any of it and had begged her not to harass us. She also told me that my ex was telling people I'd kidnapped my brother from our parents and was turning him against her. I forwarded the message to my parents with a heads up so they wouldn't be blindsided if anyone reached out. My mom's reply was 3 words, we've got you. In the middle of all this, life kept going the way life insists on doing. The orientation and mobility specialist came by for a lesson on street crossings. We were both wired from the night before and I almost canceled, but my brother wanted to go. I'm not going to let her make me afraid of corners too, he said, which made me laugh in spite of everything. We practiced at the big intersection by the coffee shop with the loud espresso machine. The specialist showed him how to track the surge of parallel traffic, how to line up his hips, when to trust his timing. He took a breath, lifted his cane, and stepped into the street like it was a sentence he finally knew how to finish. At the far curb he grinned so wide I could hear it. "I did it," he said, and the barista must have recognized us from the times I've dragged in, because she shouted from the doorway, "You did it." A random dog barked twice like it agreed. It felt like something in the world had tilted back toward decent. The hearing for the order was short and drained me in a different way. She showed up, tried to talk to me in the hallway, and got pulled back by a deputy. In the courtroom she cried, then sneered, then cried again. The judge looked tired. He asked her if she had any reason to be at my apartment at 11 at night after being told not to come, and she said she was just acting spontaneously. He looked at the video and at the text where she told me to ignore it if I loved her, and signed the order without much ceremony. I felt nothing for a second and then everything. Outside, she muttered that I was dramatic. I kept walking. Everything at home feels different, and not in the way I expected. There is a quiet now that doesn't hum with dread. My brother and I fell into this nightly routine we didn't plan. We make dinner together, and he stands at the stove with a long-handled spoon while I describe where the steam is curling, how the onions sound when they go from sharp to soft. He's picked up the skill of finding the exact pan by sound alone, a soft ring of metal on metal that somehow isn't a trigger anymore but a tool. He named his cane, as a joke, he calls it Finch, and he taps it twice by the door before we leave, like a little ritual of luck. One more thing happened that surprised me. My ex's mother reached out again, not about her daughter but about a community group she runs that pairs volunteers with people adjusting to vision loss for practical stuff, reading, mail, rearranging closets, figuring out those tiny tactile markers for appliances. She said they could meet us on our terms, at our place, on our schedule. I hesitated, but my brother said, "Let's try it. I'm done letting one person ruin everything for me." Yesterday, 2 volunteers came by, a college student and a retired music teacher, and they took our junk drawer out and set it on a towel and helped us make sense of the chaos. My brother made them laugh, describing how the drawer had become a museum of useless batteries and mystery screws. It felt good. I'm putting her things in a box for her mother to pick up when I'm not home. In the pocket of a hoodie she left was a string of tiny bells, the cheap kind you'd sew on a holiday decoration. I sat there a long time holding them. Then I put them in the trash. My brother heard the bells and called from the table, "What are you doing?" I told him. He paused and said, "Cool," and went back to winning me at cards. He can't see the cards, but he's memorized my tells. He says I always click my tongue when I get a good hand. I accused him of cheating. He tapped Finch twice and said, "Nope. I'm just more aware of my surroundings." Then we both groaned at the joke and laughed anyway. Update 3. 2 nights ago, the building screamed awake. That ugly, metallic wail that grabs your spine came from everywhere at once, and then, under it, a smell, sharp and chemical, like burned plastic. I was halfway off the couch, heart in my mouth, before my brother had his cane in his hand. He tapped Finch twice by the door and said, calm in a way that made me calm, "Rail on the right, landings every 12. Don't run." The lobby lights were already strobing red. Someone on the 3rd floor had tried to microwave a foil-wrapped sandwich. Smoke slouched along the ceiling and then decided to come down and get friendly. The old lady from the 2nd floor opened her door, saw the strobe, and made a sound I've only heard once before when her cat got stuck under the laundry machine. My brother reached his cane toward her like you reach toward a doorstep dog, gentle and certain. "Hand on my shoulder," he told her. "Keep your other hand on the wall. We're going to take this easy." I watched him check our door with the back of his hand like they taught him, then the air for movement, then the stairwell for the hollow drum of the elevator everyone forgets not to use. He listened. "Stairs," he said, and we went. Down the first set, left turn, landing, the chipped second to last step he's catalogued in his head bumped his toe and he said, "There you are," like greeting an old friend. A neighbor we always call Quiet Hoodie because he wears one and never speaks was suddenly not quiet. I can't see," he kept saying. My brother laughed, quick and kind. "Welcome to my level," he said, and Quiet Hoodie hiccuped, then stuck his fingers in the back pocket of my brother's hoodie and followed. On the 2nd floor, a man opened his door fast and hot air rolled out. My brother banged his cane against the railing, a sharp, pan sound. "Hey," he said. "Back of your hand on the knob first. If it's hot, don't open it. Get down low." He said it the way he stirs onions when they go from sharp to soft, steady, sure. The man crouched, coughed, closed his door, and we kept moving, a little train, old lady's slippers, on the concrete, my hand hovering but not helping because he didn't need it. He counted without making it math. Landing, 2, 3, there's a scuff on 5, like a poem only he knew. We spilled into the lobby and the air was colder. The barista from the corner shop was outside in pajama pants and a coffee-stained apron, hair in a nest. She saw us come out and waved a cup in our direction. "Hero Coco," she said, and thrust it at my brother like a prize. He laughed and his hands shook when he wrapped them around the warm cardboard. The firefighters came in that practical, delicious rush of people who know exactly what to do. One of them asked if everyone was out and my brother lifted his chin and said, "Third floor south is staying put, smoke in the hall, door hot," like he'd been briefing fire crews his whole life. The firefighter looked at him like you look at a person who just made your job easier and said, "Good ears," and clapped him on the shoulder. We stood in the midnight light and shivered, toes bare on the concrete. Quiet Hoodie lit a cigarette and then looked at it like it was a betrayal and put it out with his shoe. The old lady held onto my elbow long after her hand stopped shaking. When they finally let us back in, the hallway smelled like 100 cheap cleaners trying to cover a mistake. My brother tapped Finch twice by our door and said, "Home," after the chain slid back, and it sounded like a blessing. The next morning the world had the nerve to be normal. The orientation specialist texted to ask if we wanted to reschedule the bus training and my brother sent back, "No." Big day. He had an intake for a guide dog program, the first step in what they warned us could be a long wait list. He ironed his own shirt by touch, slow and patient, and I wanted to cry over a collar. The center smelled like leather and clean wool and the sweet, warm animal that lives in your chest when you're 8 and somebody finally hands you a puppy. They sat us in a room with a plastic model of a harness on the table, like a museum tour where you get to touch. They asked him about his routines, his streets, the corners that scare him and the ones he likes. They asked him what he wanted in a dog and he said, confident, a little bit funny, and the trainer wrote it down like it was a trait they could check off a list. She took one look at Finch and said, "We won't make him jealous," deadpan, and my brother snorted. Then they took him outside and put a handle in his hand and a wise old lab named Oates under it. They weren't theirs, not yet, just a test, just a feel. He stood still for a second with the strap in his fist. Oates leaned his whole cloudy-headed body into my brother's leg like they were old. The trainer talked softly about movement. He'll stop at curbs and clear obstacles. You'll feel it in your hand. You'll learn to trust it. My brother pulled in a breath I could hear and let it go and then they went. The difference in his walk almost made me stupid. Instead of that constant, careful checking the cane makes you do, there was glide. Not fast, not reckless, but something like, freedom feels too big a word and not big enough. He came back flushed and damp, hair stuck up in the front, hand still on the handle even after Oates sat down and blew a dog sigh. "It feels like somebody moved the furniture out of my brain," he said. "I could just go." On the way home we stopped at the coffee shop. The barista held up a muffin like a trophy and said, "We have a rule now. First guide dog walk requires a blueberry." My brother told her his favorite corner was the one where the bus wheezes and she told him hers was the one with the flaky croissants, but we both knew she meant a different kind. It was small talk and not small at all. Back at the apartment, there was a small brown box by our door with my ex's mother's neat handwriting on it. I had left her daughter's things for pickup, and this was a return volley I hadn't expected. Inside, a pair of oven mitts, the thick quilted kind, and a note that said, "I am sorry for the bells. For everything. Please keep these." My brother slid his fingers over the stitching and said, "Good texture," like he was appraising art. I leaned against the counter and let myself want to believe in the version of the world where mothers try to unspool harm they didn't manage to stop. I put the mitts on the hook by the stove and felt like the kitchen had said yes to us, a little. That evening, my brother did something that made me think my heart was going to walk out of my chest and go stand in the hall and clap. He told me he wanted to try the coffee shop by himself. "I know the route," he said. "You can follow far enough back that I can't feel your worry." He waited for the parallel traffic to surge, shoulders squared to the click of the walk sign he can't see but hears. He stepped off and used the skills the specialist had carved into his muscles, and I walked a half block behind holding onto my breath with both hands. At the corner, a woman with a stroller took a step like she was going to grab him and then stopped when he found the curb like he was born there. He went in, and I stood outside like a creep and listened to the espresso scream and the barista say, "Hey, Finch's friend," because she can't resist nickname creep, and my brother say, "Just me today," and the bell ding. When he came back out, he held up the cup like a trophy and I exaggerated a cheer and he rolled his eyes and took a sip and winced, too hot, and laughed at himself and I've never loved anything more. Update 4. The call came at 6:13 a.m., the hour the city is all truck brakes and birds that don't know they live in a city. Unknown number. A calm voice said there'd been a cancellation at the guide dog program. If we could get there by Monday, they had a spot. My brother mouthed, "Yes?" at me while I still had toothpaste foaming in my mouth. I nodded like I was voting for air. The center is 2 hours away and smells like lemon cleaner, wet wool, and the exact dog shampoo that turns your hands slick. They gave us a tour that was really a walk through an alphabet of purpose, kennels humming with low-throated dog talk, a mock street with a tiny crosswalk and a fake bus door, a cafeteria where nobody bats at the sound of a dropped metal bowl. The harness they laid on the table for him was new leather that creaked like the inside of a saddle shop. He put his hand on it like you touched the hood of a car that just turned off. Warm. They didn't tell us his match right away, there's a ritual to it. Assessment first. He did traffic checks with a trainer and a human pretending to be a dog, which was the most earnest charade I've ever watched. They had him step and stop and step again, feel the weight of waiting. He was a coil in a hoodie, all potential energy, until they finally brought out a cinnamon-colored lab with a white spray down his nose like someone thumbed flour on him. The trainer said, "This is Tango," and my brother smiled so hard he forgot to make it cool. Tango put his head against my brother's knee and leaned in, just enough to say, "Hey, I'm here, I'm a little bit funny but I'm going to get you home." The first walk was in the fake street. He held the handle and Tango took one clean step and then another and my brother's shoulders did a thing I've only seen once, when he first took a shower after the hospital and realized the water knew how to find him. He said, breathless, "Okay," and Tango's ears flicked like he'd passed a test. Real streets were the next day. The trainer talked about intelligent disobedience like you might talk about a friend who knows when to pull you back from a bad idea without making it a fight. Corner, curb, the song of parallel traffic, their words, it became muscle in him. They set him up at a quiet intersection that hides a mean streak in the form of an electric car nobody hears until it's there. "Forward," he said, and Tango squared up and didn't move. My brother tried again, a little question mark at the end of the word. Tango leaned back, firm, and the trainer's hand ghosted his shoulder but didn't touch. The electric car slid past like a bad thought. My brother's breath left his chest with a sound that lives somewhere between laugh and cry and he said, "Okay," again, but this time it meant I trust you. They moved then, and I swallowed a gulp of air like I'd been underwater without noticing. There were small things that felt big. In the dining hall a kid ran his palm flat down Tango's spine like he was polishing him and my brother said, "He's working, not sharp, just iron." The kid's mother made that face people make when they remember rules too late. The trainer took them aside and showed the kid how to scratch two careful fingers on a non-working shoulder. Later, in the grocery store they use for field trips, a man with a dog in a red vest that said service in letters that worked too hard came in hot and let his dog hit the end of the leash like a slingshot. Tango tucked in close and made himself wide, a wall you didn't know you needed until it was there. The other dog yodeled. The man said, "He's friendly," like that was an apology you could staple to the moment. The trainer put her palm out in the universal stop sign that lives in kindergarten and courtrooms and said, "No, he isn't," in a voice that could slice a sandwich clean. The store manager popped out of nowhere with a laminated policy like a talisman. We left with milk and a lesson in how to keep your space in a world that wants to pet everything brave. Back home, the building looks a little more like it knows about us. There are raised numbers on the mailboxes now that click under your fingers like low-grade rain. The second floor alarm pulls a soft voice onto the hallway speakers after it wails, "Check your door with the back of your hand," because someone wrote that into a form and the manager taped it to the inside of his skull. The old lady asked my brother to put her medical info into her flip phone and he programmed 911 as a speed dial with a beep she can find in the dark. Quiet hoodie is less quiet. He started a group chat for the building and named it Not on Fire and nobody changed it. Finch lives by the door in a place of honor. My brother taps the tip twice against the baseboard when we leave, a salute to the old captain, and then he picks up Tango's handle with that two-handed care you give sugar packets when you're tired. "Co-captains," he said the first night, and Tango looked up at the word like it was his name, and I had to pretend to cough. The city did something I didn't expect without being chased. A councilwoman called our orientation specialist for input on intersections and then called us. In the tiny room where they hold the meetings that decide which cracks get filled and which corners get a voice, my brother put his palms on the edge of the table and said, "The espresso machine is louder than the walk signal," and the councilwoman didn't laugh. She wrote it down. They installed an audible signal at the coffee shop corner, a chirp and a click that nest into the traffic's throat. The morning it went on, he stood there with Tango sitting like geometry at his left, and listened to the first legal bird of that block. The barista stuck her head out of the door and said, "They made you a song," and he said, "They made us a song, and for once that us didn't come from being related to me." He meant everyone who needs it. He took his first bus solo with Tango last week. I followed half a block back because he asked me to keep my worry where I can't feel it. They boarded like they'd rehearsed it all night, Tango's front feet up, pause, back feet, a patient pivot into the aisle. A man with a Bluetooth earpiece talked to himself like he was auditioning for a play and said, "To nobody and everybody, I don't know why people get dogs for attention," and my brother adjusted his grip on the handle and didn't make any words waste themselves on that sentence. 2 stops later, a teenage girl with glitter on her cheek said, straight at him, "Your dog has better shoulders than my boyfriend," and he grinned without trying to find where she was. "Same," he said, and Tango flicked a crumb of ear like he agreed. The only almost bad thing was stairs that fooled him. Train station, concrete that echoes weird. The down staircase is split, a little death trap triangle where everyone's foot wants to go first. He said, "Forward," and Tango took him 2 steps and then jammed the brakes and backed up so sharply my stomach lifted. The trainer's voice was in his head even though she wasn't there. "Trust the stop." He did. A man carrying a trumpet case whipped by at knee level and took the slot that would have been my brother's shin. My brother let out a swear and then a laugh, and when we got to the bottom, he bent over Tango's neck and said, "Intelligent disobedience is a terrible phrase," and started scritching him under the collar, and Tango held still and leaned into joy like it was a job. At home, Tango did finally find one sock. He didn't shred it, just carried it around like a flag and then tried to trade it for a carrot. Confident, a little bit funny, my brother said, and we both pretended we weren't buying a basket with a lid. There was one envelope that made me sweat before I opened it. Not her handwriting, clean, printed label from the courthouse. It was just a slip reminding me the harassment order is renewed automatically if there's no contest. I pinned it inside a kitchen drawer behind the box of tea we never drink. My brother listened to me slide the drawer and said, "Gentle, it's a good place for it, like maybe some papers do better in the dark for a while." He started Braille lessons in person, no Zoom tile of a hand over a camera, just a heavy Perkins machine that landed on our table like a small, purposeful tank. The keys are clacky and the dots it spits are so sharp at first they almost hurt. He jokes that his fingers are learning to listen. The first thing he typed was his name, and then mine, because he's a sap when he thinks I'm not looking. The page looked like a constellation map for a sky only we can read. He let me slide my palms over it and something shifted cleanly in my throat, some grief turning itself into a path. The best part, the part that made my ribs feel too small, happened yesterday. He set his alarm himself, 5 beeps soft, got up, put on the shirt with the good seams, and took Tango out without asking if I wanted to come. I stood at the window like a cliché, which is sometimes just what fits, and watched them take the corner where the tree always drops those sticky seed pods. Tango paused, huffed, picked a path, and my brother stepped into the world on that line of trust they laid together. Half a block, then another, then out of sight. I didn't look at my phone for 3 minutes and then I looked at my phone every 10 seconds. He came back with a new sound in his voice, a little lift like he'd found a joke he wasn't going to share yet. He held up a folded piece of paper. The barista had written Finch's friend, no, Tango's person and a smiley face and taped a free coffee punch card inside. He said, "I didn't need you," and then he said, "I wanted to tell you anyway," and Tango shook his collar and made a bell song without bells.